Welcome to the roundtable on disinformation.
Bienvenue à cette table ronde sur la désinformation et la résilience démocratique, outils pour contrer les menaces numériques. Je suis Tatiana Carayannis et je suis votre modératrice aujourd'hui. Nous sommes dans un monde avec de plus en plus de menaces numériques. Il est donc essentiel de préserver les processus démocratiques et les espaces civiques. Cette session rassemble des experts pour justement parler des stratégies qui existent pour contrer la désinformation, pour renforcer les cyberinfrastructures et pour construire la résilience sociétale face à ces menaces en ligne. Nous savons que des solutions existent pour contrer la désinformation avec des technologies de fact-checking. Il existe également des solutions pour protéger les ONG contre les menaces en ligne et améliorer leur résilience numérique de manière plus large. Nous allons pouvoir discuter de ces solutions cet après-midi avec nos experts. Certains d'entre eux ont d'ailleurs des projets qui seront présentés plus en détail à l'occasion de ce forum. Je vais vous proposer de vous présenter chacun votre tour, mais puisque nous n'avons pas beaucoup de temps, je vous inviterai à regarder leur biographie complète sur le programme de l'événement si vous le souhaitez. Jihad Bittar, qui est donc PDG de Siren Analytics, une entreprise de transformation numérique et de données qui est présente dans la région MENA et en Europe. Siren Analytics travaille sur l'utilisation de la technologie pour contrer la désinformation grâce à la plateforme Dalil. Jihad a une expertise en technologie, politique et management. Stéphane Duguin, quant à lui, est PDG du CyberPeace Institute, qui fournit un soutien gratuit en cybersécurité aux communautés vulnérables. Depuis 20 ans, pendant 20 ans à Europol, il a mené à bien des opérations majeures contre le cybercrime et la désinformation. Il a conseillé des institutions mondiales et il a également travaillé au Conseil de sécurité de l'ONU sur la question des menaces en matière de cybersécurité, les menaces à la paix internationale. Christopher Locke est vice-président exécutif de l'Internet Society Foundation, où il travaille à renforcer la stratégie et les opérations numériques. Il a travaillé pendant 30 ans en recherche, mais également dans l'industrie, au sein de la société civile, et il apporte une expertise sur comment créer un Internet qui soit au service de chacun. Rebecca Mackinnon est conseillère spéciale à la Global Advocacy de Wikimedia Foundation. L'objectif pour elle est de soutenir des politiques qui protègent et font avancer la connaissance libre en ligne. Elle est journaliste et universitaire. Elle a cofondé Global Voices. Elle a écrit Consent of the Networks et créé également Ranking Digital Rights. Elle a travaillé dans les médias, dans les universités. Et elle a également travaillé pendant des années pour la CNN à Pékin et à Tokyo. Svetlana Zilianovskaya est une spécialiste des communications stratégiques à la Metamorphosis Foundation. Elle a été conseillère au Premier ministre de Macédoine du Nord. Elle a mené à bien des efforts nationaux pour contrer la désinformation et renforcer la résilience démocratique. Elle a beaucoup d'expérience au sein de l'OTAN, dans la communication en matière de sécurité, et elle a travaillé sur la préparation face aux crises et sur la lutte contre la manipulation étrangère. Bienvenue à chacun. Nous allons commencer avec donc une présentation de 2-3 minutes de la part de chacun de nos orateurs aujourd'hui, et puis
after which we'll then open to questions from the audience. So, if I can turn to our speakers, and we'll begin with I think we can just go in a counterclockwise order, perhaps beginning with Christopher. A question for all of you as you open this discussion. Is as AI-driven disinformation and deepfakes become more sophisticated, what do you see from your particular vantage point as the greatest threats to democratic resilience and public trust? So we'll start with Chris and perhaps work our way around. Yep, Chris?
Thank you very much. So for us at the Internet Society, for over 30 years, we've worked to connect people to the Internet, to make sure that the Internet they have is something that they can participate with in a safe and secure way. What we have seen is that participation increases trust. What we have seen is that giving people the belief that they have an Internet that they themselves have some sense of ownership, control, and interactivity with is fundamental. So, getting over the public trust issue and making sure that what we're building is an environment that allows people to feel that sense of engagement and trust in the internet for us is fundamental. One of the issues with the way that AI is challenging this is firstly that we are seeing LLMs and systems that are built on a very small set of data representing a small population of the world. So there is a disengagement with the fundamentals underpinning the way that AI systems are being led and the way that AI systems are being used. But more importantly, as we're seeing AI increasingly circulating on social media platforms that themselves very often had very strong regional biases in the way that they were structuring people's attention spans, means that what people are getting is increasingly a sense of almost kind of a compound disengagement or a compound a lack of engagement in the way that digital works. So building back some of the fundamental principles of the way the internet works for us at the Internet Society is about making sure there is a community-level engagement, making sure there are training programs and services that help communities build an internet that works for them and build a set of services that works for them. Because for us, trust comes from that sense of ownership, engagement, and equity, rather than just trying to build a sense that people trust the platform or trust the content they're seeing, because that may be a Rubicon we've crossed now. So getting back to that sense of ownership and engagement for us is critical to building trust.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Chris. Svetlana.
Thank you very much. And I'll try and be brief. When working in disinformation and mapping for many years of disinformating actors and the methods that they have been using, particularly in the Western Balkan region, we can see that AI is being used harshly to overflood the information space with a lot of information which are directly affecting the citizens' trust in general, trust in everything, in institutions, in democracy, in elections, and whatsoever. The quantum and the speediness in which this happens is making impossible for any anti-disinformation actor in the region to counter it, to even track it down and map it. So what we have been developing, and my organization has been developing within a larger regional network in the before years, is actually a pre-bunking methodology, which is going to predict these actions from happening and then possibly affect, in a way, it might deter the actors, the disinformation actors, from actually deploying disinformation strategies. What we're trying to do is actually increase the level of the credibility of the voice when we say that these are the disinformators in the region who are doing this. We can increase our credibility through saying this is going to happen, watch out, this is going to affect the stability, this is going to affect the peace, this is going to create a conflict, and give a little bit of time to the democratic actors in the region to use this information and then counter these strategies. Because with the speed of AI and the mass production of disinformation, by the time we are on the train to map it down, we are already too late and the damage is already done. So this is one of the things that the pre-bunking is doing. The pre-bunking is actually predicting before it happens, so to make sure it's not happening, and also to make sure that if it happens, there are some strategies to deploy it in the meantime.
Thank you, Svetlana. We look forward to hearing more. Rebecca, over to you.
Thanks so much. So,
I think you have to press it. Yeah.
there we are. Thanks so much for this excellent panel, and I really appreciate the opportunity to build on some of the things that was just said by the past two speakers. What especially resonated with me was that participation fosters trust and fosters authenticity. I work for the Wikimedia Foundation. We are the nonprofit organization that supports Wikipedia and other volunteer-run free knowledge projects that are maintained by hundreds of thousands of people, not algorithms or AIs, in over 300 languages. The best Wikipedia pages are those that are edited monitored, improved by the greatest number of people from the widest range of backgrounds and different types of expertise. One thing that some of you may know, but many people I find haven't thought of, is that Wikipedia is one of the biggest sources of training data for basically all of the large language models that anybody has heard of, and many that you haven't heard of or used. But Wikipedia is only as reliable as the sources that our editors are able to cite, because Wikipedia is not a primary source. It's collecting and curating and contextualizing information coming from reliable sources, as our community of editors have determined what constitutes a reliable source and what does not in different contexts, depending on the subject matter. And so, of course, if there are no reliable sources to cite, or a dwindling number, that's a problem. So journalism, scientific journals, independent research reports, the organizations and people that generate this original, reliable, fact-based knowledge are the fundamental, real, not just antidote to disinformation, but the essential sources of democratic resilience, the strongest antibodies to disinformation and deep fakes. It's people. One of the problems we have is that the people who create this information, who report, who investigate, who curate, translate, are increasingly threatened. They're threatened in terms of their livelihoods being undermined by a collapse of funding, collapse of civic space in many places, publicly discredited by disinformation and propaganda happening, coming from many official and unofficial sources, and of course physically threatened by state and non-state actors. Not only was last year the most dangerous year on record for journalists around the world, according to CPJ, but increasingly Wikipedians, as well as scientists and others, are under threat physically, as well as by very coordinated disinformation campaigns. If you look at talking points coming from Russia and talking points coming from my home country, certain parts of the media recently, there's a lot of similarities in those talking points. And so if we do not defend the people, if we do not adequately defend and protect the communities of practice, AI-slop and propaganda will triumph, because no matter how much debunking or other techniques we use to track and discredit disinformation, if the people who are actually generating the trusted information and participating, then we've got a real problem.
Thank you, Rebecca. Indeed. Stéphane, over to you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. In fact, I'll build into what you just mentioned about the threat landscape on these actors, experts, which are spending most of their days and life to protect what is important for us. You're mentioning the information space, but not only. I mean, it goes to humanitarian workers, it goes to people that are fighting climate change, it goes to people that are helping refugees. I mean, the whole construct of civil society, which is today under threat. And you summarized the threat quite well. So, CyberPeace Institute, we are based in Geneva, and what we do in this regard is that we provide for free digital resilience and cybersecurity to these non-profits. And we also track and trace independently the campaign of cyberattacks and information operations, so the convergence between cyberattacks and disinformation against these entities. And to your question, what was happening before AI and what is happening since AI? And is the situation getting better? In fact, it's not. So what we learned from our community is that as a civil society actor, in a world where budget is getting scarce, you're mentioning it, in the world where the trust into what we do is undermined by campaign of disinformation and the like, and where, because of AI, it's becoming cheaper for everyone around the planet to attack anyone around the planet for few bucks, if even you have to pay for it anymore, the work becomes very complicated. And civil society, at its core, has something problematic in terms of the capacity to be mature in cyber. Civil society is about the mission. It's about spending all the money that you get on your mission. It's about doing everything that you can to protect. And normally you don't have so much of a budget to hire an IT expert or a cybersecurity expert or a disinformation expert that's going to help you to defend yourself and to communicate with the community to be resilient. And that's the work that we do. We engage with the private sector to get free workforce to deploy with civil society. We engage with philanthropies in order to have partnership for us to ensure the cybersecurity of their grantees. We engage with other civil society actors which are doing similar or tangential work to have joint analysis in order to have better impact. And very recently, but we are going to talk about this in fact today, we engage with other civil society and ISOC to put together a financial instrument to be in capacity to finance this work. And that's the only thing that we can do when AI multiplies the threats. Because today, the fact that thanks to LLM, language-based cyber attack, which were not accessible in certain parts of the world, now you can attack anyone in any language, even if you don't master it. The fact that you can create fakes that are extremely realistic for the attack is a problem. And I would just finish by an example. A philanthropy, a foundation, which is heavily involved in financing civil society, a few weeks ago was targeted by a deepfake, a full chain from a video call to an audio call in order to convince them to put the money where they're not supposed to put it. So this is where the threat is. It's not only the civil society in the field managing the work, but also the civil society or the foundation which are funding the NGOs.
Thank you, Stéphane. Jihad.
So we Siren Analytics, and we operate the platform Dalil. You can visit us downstairs. We operate usually in high conflict, low resource zones. So we're based in Lebanon. We work also in Eastern Europe. This is a bit the experience. I'd like to discuss about. I've heard the word term trust, and it's in the title of the conference. We should never forget that trust is the fundamental layer for democracy. Democracy is a trust pact between minority and a majority, between minorities themselves, between the majority. What disinformation is doing, because Tatiana, you asked about the threats. What disinformation is doing is destroying this trust. Okay, and the impact of this that is happening, we all know it, but I just want to pinpoint a few things because this is what we're trying to tackle with Dalil, and I think all the colleagues here are, in a way, everyone on their, in different approaches. The first is the impact of the algorithms, the algorithmic manipulation that is happening, or the exaggeration of the algorithm, which is creating internal tensions, and we see it everywhere we operate. How does this function? Algorithms in social media are built in general to put first where you have a lot of anger, a lot of sentiment. Let me put it this way, not anger, but a lot of sentiment. So the more disinformation tackles this algorithmic manipulation, if you want, what's going to happen is going to increase these sentiments. It's going to appear first. So we're in a bad loop here that is happening. So this is creating internal tensions. The second threat that is happening is AI has reduced the cost of disinformation. The cost of doing disinformation has plummeted a lot. The impact of this is disinformation used to be done heavily. Now it's being done at super heavy scale. And the impact of this are the threat for societies, for democratic societies, are tired societies. Everywhere we work, we operate, we see people are tired. It's a lot of news. It's heavy news. It's local, and this is what the second thing AI is allowing to do, is to target local communities. You can do very targeted attacks, and this is super interesting as a practitioner, but it's super dangerous at the same time because you create even more tensions. The third impact on this, and I'll finish here. The third thing is, and this is where our platform Dalil is really working, is the flood of of narratives that is happening. There are so many new narratives because AI allows to create so many narratives so much faster and to spread them so much faster, be it through video, be it through, like Stéphane was saying, or text or whatever, right? And all these new narratives are a lot of time a threat. There are ways to counter this because AI can be, I'm not against AI. I think AI is something that can do lots of good. But this is the situation we're seeing a bit everywhere, unfortunately.
Thank you, Jihad, and thank you to all of you for underscoring the urgency to counter these. I won't call them emerging threats, but emergent threats. Stéphane, you work primarily with nonprofits, and that's your mandate of your organization. Tell us what's the most dangerous consequence of cyber attacks that specifically target nonprofits. Are they the same across the board? Are they sector specific? Are they specific to nonprofits? Are they the same kinds of threats that nonprofits are experiencing that the private sector experiences? Please.
Well, thank you. It's not so much known, but the non-profit as a sector is one of the sectors the most impacted by cyber attacks and information operation. Because sadly enough, it's one of the only sectors which is attacked by everyone who is in capacity to do malicious activity on the internet. So on one hand, state actors, obviously. And state actors can do extremely dangerous operation against non-profit with enormous means. And they have an agenda. You know, when you want to target a non-profit, it's for a valid reason, because that non-profit is helping refugees after an invasion, or that non-profit is providing humanitarian relief in a space of the world you don't want to have this relief to happen, all these agendas. Plus, states have the capacity to deploy very intrusive technologies against non-profit, like spyware or cyber mercenaries. But at the same time, non-profit are victims of cyber criminals. Sometimes these criminals, they work for the state or hosted by states. But at the end of the day, criminals, they are like, you know, a good old case Facebook campaign. They send advertisement to all of the planet and they see who is clicking on it. And then starts, if you click, you're vulnerable, you're a victim. Or if you are above the vulnerability level, even if you click, you're not going to be a victim. And sadly enough, for non-profit, because they're not mature enough, this is happening and they become victims of indiscriminated attacks. And at the end, you also have all this loose network of hacktivism, which is politically motivated, which is also taking non-profit as a target because of what they do for a living, and sometimes some activists do just disagree with the mission. And this blend creates a unique threat landscape. Examples seen, sadly enough, we have the chance to have, I think they're in the room, the partnership with the City of The Hague. The City of The Hague was one of the first to identify that non-profit within their geography have a specific threat profile that should be specifically protected. And then we engaged with the City of The Hague and the hub of non-profit over there, and we discovered across sector of activities that everyone was under attack. And that's how we deployed our services for cybersecurity. And we also discovered that the type of attack are not so different than the one for the private sector. But what is very different is the capacity to defend. It's a competitive market. If you look around the world, the number of positions for cybersecurity experts, there's more positions open than experts in the world to get the job. Mm-hmm. So in this market, non-profit will not be the place where cybersecurity experts are going to work. They cannot compete with the salaries and the like. So that's an issue. And I will finish with something, is that non-profit is also, I think you're mentioning it in terms of the threat landscape, they are not solely targeted by someone who wants to enter into your network and take you down. They're also targeted on the content part of the internet, reputational cost. I'm going to destroy your activities on the net. And now we realize, because we just launched recently a task force about this, that the threat actors behind that, they have the same infrastructure, the same tool, the same HR, in order to do everything. Yep. So they will fire at you everything that they had, being a malware, a ransomware, an info stealer, a denial of service, a disinformation, a deepfake, whatever they have to hurt, they will send it to you. And that's what non-profit needs to cope with.
Exactly.
Thanks, Stéphane. Chris, what would you say is the most significant obstacle, aside from financing, I think that Stéphane has also raised, or human capital, that currently prevents effective, non-market-driven digital security solutions from achieving the scale that we need for democratic defense?
It's kind of a hard question to answer the way it's phrased, because the problem is capital. But we'll come back to that at the end. Picking up on something that Stéphane said, he phrased at the beginning of the little talk he gave just then, that you might not know it, but NGOs and civil society sector are some of the most targeted. And it's the you might not know it, which I would say is also one of the issues. If a bank suffers a cybersecurity attack, if an airline suffers a cybersecurity attack, you will hear about that. You know, that will be on the news, and it will be a big deal. If an NGO or a civil society organization that is fundamental to protecting people's lives, that is fundamental to supporting those communities that need it the most, is affected, it's very likely you won't. And I think that sense of the scale of the problem, and in the way that Stéphane has just described it, and the genuine lack of awareness, even in civil society and non-profit organizations, is a really big issue. You know, you will. We are a donor ourselves. We're very happy to host the Common Good Cyber Fund that Stéphane gave reference to, that we're coming together with other donors. We're talking about this later on at 5 o'clock if people want to come to our session on that. But we've put together this fund with the Common Good Cyber Group to try and pull the sector together and to try and pull donors together. You know, we understand, we think, what you need to fund NGOs and civil society organizations to do. And I think if we all looked as donors at the grants we'd given out, I would be amazed if any of us have a line item that says cybersecurity support. I'd be absolutely shocked if anyone outside of the tech and society sector has funded a non-profit. So we have a very small group of people really fighting almost kind of a hidden battle to protect the civil society sector. You know, the challenges to the work that the non-profit sector does, whether it is through opportunistic attacks for material gain, or whether it is for very deliberately targeted attacks by non-state and state actors, the challenges this century that the non-profit societies are going to find will come from digital ways. I mean, we don't really need to talk about things with the word digital in front of them anymore. We don't have a digital society and a digital economy. We have the society and we have the economy, which is increasingly just digital. So the attacks that will hit the non-profit sector are really very focused on this vector of attack. Therefore, it's really incumbent on all of us to be able to think about how we can fund and support activities that do that. It feels very central to us. The Internet Society is very fortunate to be funded by a non-profit entity that we own called Public Internet Registry. Public Internet Registry own the top-level domain for .org and all the non-profit domains. Many of you around the table will own an entity that has a .org or a .charity. I thank you for your custom. We use that money to give our grants out, and so putting money back into this for us is about us securing the 10 million non-profits around the world who are increasingly finding that cyber attack is a big issue for them.
Thanks, thanks, Chris. Svetlana and also Jihad. Svetlana, you talked about fact checkers. What would you each say, in your experience, is the one technological or methodological leap that fact checkers need the most to stay ahead of these new disinformation tactics in the Balkans, in the Middle East, and is fact checking enough?
Certainly it's not enough, because from one side we have actors who are across the sectors. They're governmental, they're non-governmental, they're private sector, they're willing to put resources, they're willing to put cooperation, which is crossing borders, religions, languages, to achieve that one goal, which is to diminish trust into democratic societies as such, and also to, achieve their common goal of particularly maybe the methods in which this will be achieved. On the other hand, we do have these fragmented efforts in our society to counter these strategies. And fact-checking is one of these efforts, which is foundation. It's very much needed, but it's not enough. AI has certainly helped a lot into the fact-checking process. It has limited the time a fact-checker needs to, do the research, to find out all of the information that's needed to be checked, and then give credibility to the information that we are providing out there. However, what we have seen, particularly in the Western Balkans regions, that the fact-checkers are benefiting most is the merging of the databases, the joint access to the databases, because a lot of us work in the same field and actually focus on our own knowledge, but we're quite often not doing knowledge sharing. So what we have managed, for instance, to see in the Western Balkans, once we created this anti-disinformation network, which is gathering the fact-checkers from not just the Western Balkans, but also from the EU member countries, such as Greece, Croatia, Turkey. When we merged the knowledge into the database, we saw that it's a regional strategy that we are dealing with, that the disinformators outside of the region are having regional strategy. Therefore, we can see the same actors, the same narratives, the same patterns of behavior, and enable us to very much be better at what we do, and not just map down the facts and provide the proper information out there, but then also to spot what's happening in the region, and then make it easier for media monitors and for analysts to map down and provide this whole bigger picture, and then learn how to counter it and give recommendations on how to counter it.
Thanks. So coalitions that are outside your immediate region. Jihad.
No, Svetlana is absolutely right, and I think actually this is how Dalil started a few years back. Was to sort of help a coalition of fact-checkers in the MENA region to work together over 8 countries and coordinate. And Dalil originally, it has evolved since, but was to help scale up the work of the fact-checkers, But if to answer more directly your question, I wouldn't say it's a technological leap as much as I see it. Unfortunately, being a fact checker is probably one of the toughest jobs out there, right? And it's probably one of the most under-recognized jobs out there. It's a very niche job. You're a fact checker. Okay, you did your job, and you can use AI to detect. What's the sounding board for fact checkers? How is it getting to the general public? It's very nice if it gets to us here who are in this field and are interested by this field. It's going to remain niche. If we don't help the fact checkers, it starts with protecting them from cyber attacks. It starts from it's like a football game, right? It starts from defense and offense. But then you have to move to offense at one point. And offense is allowing fact checkers to spread the message, to say, look, this is fake, this is wrong. Watch out, because they often, fact checkers know beforehand what's coming, because they get the habit. It's called, it's experience. This is where I think funding is lacking. This is where I think the capacity to react is funding. We tried with Dalil, we are doing this with Dalil, at least to provide them the tool to scale up their work, to coordinate their work, to work on this. But then the sounding board of this is something that we all need to really think about, else it's a losing battle.
Well, thanks. Hopefully, Rebecca, you will provide some optimism. But you mentioned that that Wikipedia is really the largest database that is used across many of these campaigns. But what would you say is the most pressing policy challenge facing open knowledge platforms right now? Is it state censorship? You mentioned that there's a lack of trust also in sources. Is it algorithmic amplification? From your vantage point, what do you see is the biggest challenge?
Thanks. I think the biggest policy challenge is overarching, across the board, lack of a positive vision for internet policy making. And this is across the board. If you look at most of the internet regulation that is being produced, whether it's in Europe or elsewhere, it's all intended to target specific problems or harms. I'm not saying we shouldn't address specific problems or harms, but whether it's child protection, fighting crime, etc., without thinking about who is it we need to protect, what are the activities that we want to actually promote and support. So, for example, in the United Kingdom, the Online Safety Act has an admirable goal to protect young people and children on the internet from harm. We were compelled, based on our duty and our job, which is to protect Wikipedians, people who edit Wikipedia, and our audiences, we had to challenge a provision of the Online Safety Act because if we end up being categorized as a large service, it would compel us to verify the identities of our users, which would expose our audiences and our editors to identity theft, cyber attack, all those kinds of things. Right now, we have a solemn commitment to minimize the amount of information we collect about our audiences and our editors. Unlike commercial platforms, we're not trying to monetize people. We don't even know how many unique users we have in terms of readers. We just know how many unique devices connect to the platforms. We believe it's vital that we not collect more information than that, given the threats that are mounting against people just trying to access information that I think everyone in this room agrees everyone has a right to access. That is being threatened. Our ability to protect our users is being threatened even in democracies by laws that are meant to actually address harms, but these laws are being enacted without thorough human rights safeguards, without thorough consideration of the human rights implications. Another example, the United Nations Cybercrime Convention, which is opening up for signatories, I believe, just this week.
It's done.
It's done.
It's done. It's signed.
Yeah, it's signed. So that just talk about a convention that has been widely condemned by civil society, while I assume the French government has signed it, and I haven't seen the list of who has and hasn't signed it yet, but the Electronic Frontier Foundation, a large number of other civil society organizations sent out a letter last week calling on governments not to sign it, that it will require, it obligates governments to implement surveillance mechanisms in the name of fighting crime that will be weaponized, that we guarantee will be weaponized against civil society in countries where the definition of crime includes all sorts of things, like perhaps accessing information about sexual orientation, for example, that ought to be protected under human rights standards. So we have a real problem in that laws and regulations globally are making it easier for whoever happens to win an election at any given point to weaponize law and the courts against civic space, against the people who are at the coalface fighting for accurate information to get to the public. At the same time, we're not seeing a lot of positive vision. Who are the people that these governments are committed to protect? who are the people, what are the activities, what are the types of activities that these governments are committed to protect and support so that it will even be possible to have anything other than AI-slop and propaganda and disinformation. So let's see some positive vision from governments about the type of world we want to have, the types of communities of practice, the types of self-governing public interest projects and platforms that we need to enable and support and not increasingly threaten, either with good intentions as well as bad. This is a problem. One final just thing to throw out there is that my colleagues have put together something very clever that we like to call the Wikipedia test. You can apply it to any law or treaty or proposal. Just read through that law or treaty. If there are things in there that will harm Wikipedia, that will make it harder for Wikipedia to protect its users' privacy, that will make it harder for our self-governing communities to actually set rules and enforce those rules for what constitutes a reliable source and what does not, and to put factual information out there without being sued into oblivion or jailed. If that law will make those things harder, then it's probably bad for civic space in general. So I've got a few QR codes I can pass out for people who are interested, but it's just a kind of a useful kind of conceit for very quickly putting a law to the test.
Great, thanks. I'm sure folks will be interested in having those QR codes. In the interest of time, I'm going to go directly to the Q&A and then bring it back to our speakers before we close. I ask that you keep your questions brief. I'll take 2 or 3 questions at a time, and if you have a question that's specific to one of our speakers, just say so. If not, we'll ask our speakers to respond. If you'd like to come in, just lift your placard, or actually, I guess we don't all have placards, so just raise your hand.
If you want, any questions? I can throw in something.
Yeah, go ahead. I think we've stunned them into silence. Yes.
That means we did a very good job. You mentioned there's no hope. I don't agree with you. And I mentioned before in the first question I was answering after Svetlana that AI can do good, and AI can be a very powerful tool. In our platform, for example, in Dalil, we've built all these different tools that allow to do early prevention, to early detection, and to prevent what is happening. For example, we have a tool that tools that detect emerging narratives. Okay, you can start detecting when a narrative is starting to build up and how this is starting to spread, and you can start countering it very early on. We have tools that detect, for example, increase spikes, I would say, in sentiment. You see that there's a topic where this algorithmic manipulation we're talking about before is spiking because somebody is playing with the emotions on this. You can start targeting it. And all this is done thanks to AI. We have graph networks. You can start identifying where a story originated from. Click of a button. We have an army of AI agents that is going and analyzing where a story originally originated from, and you find out it's a Telegram account or an X Twitter account, and you can do all this. So AI can be very powerful into this. You have to know how to leverage it. You have to know how to use it to counter all this. So I'm very hopeful into what's we can fight. We can fight this information. There's no reason why this can't be done. And start building counter narratives and build the narratives at the right time, in the right time.
Thanks. Chris, did you want to come in? Let's take some questions. Yeah, please.
Does that work? Yeah. Okay. Hi. Thank you, Tatiana, for moderating this, and thank you for speakers. So I'm currently developing a PhD proposal, and I guess the main questions is that what are the ways of mitigating disinformation online? And I think synthesizing for everything I've learned since the morning is that there are two ways, which is the technical and the policing part, or the policies. I guess what I'm trying to understand is that how do you integrate them both into some outcomes that are actually feasible to mitigate disinformation? Thank you.
Thanks. Is there anybody else who'd like to come in? Yeah, please. And then I'll...
Yeah, thank you all. Sorry, I have a stuffed nose. I used to work in disinformation in funding, and funding came up, and what I'm wondering is, who do you guys think should fund your efforts, and how do you think you can convince them?
Great, thank you. Great question. Let me turn it over to Svetlana. Stéphane, you wanted to come in. Chris, did you also want to take that question? Yeah.
I think I can answer both questions at the same time. So the way that we can merge is, and we're, as a Metamorphosis Foundation, strongly advocating as a solution to this, is just through the whole of society approach. As I mentioned earlier, we can see that on the one side, we have, let's say, an adversary, which is big. But it's big not just because it's looking scary. It's big because there's a whole huge network of allies that are contributing to these anti-democratic goals. We can say, and I'm comfortable using the word anti-democratic actors. So everybody who is on that side of the aisle will cooperate among each other, will share funds, will share databases, will share tools, and whatever they have in the toolbox to attack this democratic side. So the way when we can merge both technological solutions, both policy solutions, but also funds, is if we mimic this strategy. And I believe that's what's giving us, as Jihad already said, both hope and a fighting chance. Disinformation will not go away. We can see that it's there to stay, and we can see that it's rooting deeply into the information space. So what we can do is actually make sure that we unite ourselves against it, but also make sure that we become the credible voice for it. Because in order to be amplified, you also have to be a credible voice and become somebody who is trusted. And what we have seen from all of these years is that this is particularly where disinformation is stepping into attacking your credibility as a voice and then diminishing the level of visibility.
Thanks, Svetlana. Stéphane?
Yeah, to the question, how can you be impactful both on the technical and policy side when it comes to information operation, one of which being disinformation? We recently launched a task force, so a hybrid workforce in between civil society and private sector, in order to get the best brain which today are investigating the technical infrastructure used by disinformation campaignists. So a disinformation campaign is what? So you have the underlying infrastructure, servers, IP, shell companies that you buy in one country in order to mask your activities, up to the layer where you use AI or whatever to generate the content and you fire the content everywhere. And that's your campaign. We realize that focusing on the content is very tough in order to be reactive with the pace through which it's happening. And here are a lot of actors like you are already doing it. So this task force is about looking into the lower layer, the infrastructure layer. I'm a bit biased because I was 25 years in law enforcement, and what we were doing at the time is, when you want to go against cyber criminal, you go against the crime and you go against the infrastructure. And we're going to do the same for the disinformation, because the good news is, and maybe linked to the funding question, is that even criminals have problems for funding. And they cannot duplicate the infrastructure forever and to nicely segregate, this is my disinformation, this is my cyber attacks, this is my foreign interference. They don't work like this. They invest into one infrastructure, they recruit 10, 20 bad guys to manage it, and they manage everything from that place. So the task force is going to attack them from the cyber angle, the cybercrime angle, the hardcore, easy, low-hanging fruits, penal code hammer that we can find. And doing this, we are going to have an impact on disinformation. That's a tactic. And it links to policy, because when you do that, you can surface information and data that some states are in fact harboring threat actors which are doing end crime and disinformation. And then you can start having policy/diplomatic discussion. Who needs to finance it? I would say you need people that understand the potential of this kind of pilot in the first place. So fast money that could move very fast to these projects, so it's mostly philanthropies and the like. Or I was mentioning the city of The Hague in the Netherlands before. People who understood that focusing on this community and providing funding is going to give capability to do it. But then in the end, it should go for more like institutional funding in order to finance this in the long run. Imagine that today, organizations which are investigating campaign of disinformation, they do this on their free time. No one today is financing, you are going to investigate 18 months doppelganger, which is targeting the EU. No one is financing that. And still we are doing it. So we have to change this.
Thanks, Stéphane. Chris?
I'll pick up on the financing and then move to hope, because I think there is hope. Absolutely, what Stéphane said on the financing, I think everybody should be funding. Again, I think that's an incredibly hard message to send out there this year more than any other year, when so much money has left the philanthropic and aid funding circles. You know, we know there are priorities. Food is a priority, vaccines are a priority, medical services are a priority. But if the organizations that provide those services aren't able to do so because there is a cyber attack or a malware attack that prevents them from doing their work, then all of the money going to those organizations is for naught. So fundamentally, we feel that it is a responsibility of the entire donor sector, and that's why we're trying to build the coordinated donor group around the Common Good Cyber Fund initiative, so that people can come in with us and contribute to that. What The Hague has done is a fantastic but unfortunately rare example of taking a whole sector approach to this, looking at all of the NGOs that are within the structures within The Hague and saying, what are your cyber needs, is almost the exception that proves the rule at the moment. I think it has to be seen as a fundamental area for donors to invest in. And my small bit of hope, and building a little bit on the Wikimedia example, there are still millions of people contributing to Wikimedia, to the internet, to building the thing that we all fell in love with 30 years ago, which was a open, participatory and mass experience of the internet. I was sent a photo by a colleague of mine on one of our internal Slack channels as I walked into this session. We have 140,000 volunteer Internet Society members around the world, about 130 chapters. And the Rwandan chapter is literally, as we are sitting in this room, running an online safety and trust training session for people that have just come online for the first time to understand how to stay online and how to trust what information sources you use. We haven't lost that. That's still there. We don't hear about it all the time because we're focusing on the faster moving and, frankly, from a news perspective, more sexy downsides. But there are still loads of people writing Wikimedia articles. There are still loads of people in our chapters running free volunteer-based training sessions to keep people safe online. The mechanics of the internet as a mass participatory tool are still out there. We can't forget that, and we have to foreground that and support it and make sure that trust comes from that level of engagement and ownership. Otherwise, we will lose, and we will put people under some level of threat.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for injecting more hope in, especially in the session after lunch. So, Rebecca, please, you'd like to come in on
this. A few points. First, building on Chris, your optimism. I completely share that, despite everything I've said just now. In August, I attended the annual Wikimania conference, which this year was in Nairobi, and the amount of energy coming from people who contribute to Wikipedia and other projects from all over the world, many Gen Z, and not just English, but there's this whole global movement of people dedicated to getting information online in their mother tongue about their communities, to be seen and heard. It's spectacular. But it is vulnerable for all the reasons we talked about. And speaking of funding, I just looked at the list of signatories of the UN Cybercrime Treaty. European Union, France, and the UK are among the signatories. They ought to be devoting at least as much of the budget that they're devoting to cybercrime to protecting, defending civic space online. If they are sincere about their intentions with this treaty. So that's number one on funding. The other is that the sustainability is under challenge. Wikipedia, for example, is supported through the foundation primarily through donations on a banner that asks you to donate. That's still the main source of funding that funds our servers, pays our lawyers that are defending Wikipedians around the world, all the things that we do to support our communities. But increasingly, people aren't going to the websites because they're getting the information through ChatGPT and so on. And so we are going to the AI companies and saying, yes, our content is indeed free, but our servers, our infrastructure is not free. So here's a contract, and we can give you white glove service with enterprise infrastructure, but you have to pay for it. But it's not just Wikipedia. Of course, a lot of news organizations are facing existential threats, not just for-profit news, but also nonprofit news organizations facing existential threats as their traffic is going down. And how to deal with that is a big policy debate. Some people want to see a tax. I don't think that's going to work out very well. Some people want more draconian copyright law. That, in our experience, leads to greater censorship and surveillance that will not end well. But we do need the industry that are profiting mightily, and the shareholders who are profiting mightily, investors, private and public, from the rise of AI to recognize that the value that they are seeing now and that they hope to continue to see in the future depends on having something other than slop and hallucination and propaganda running through these services. And so it is in their existential interest to support the people who are creating actual information, science, and knowledge. And that there needs to be some way to give back. And I don't think tax is going to work, given that the primary jurisdiction of the biggest AI companies doesn't want to regulate anything, and taxes tend not to work so well. But there needs to be some way to get these companies to acknowledge that unless they are supporting and helping to sustain the ecosystem, you know, it's like environmental sustainability. If we're all dead, you're not going to make much money, right? That's putting it a little too bluntly, perhaps, but that's the point.
Can I also just
Yes, please, go ahead,
briefly?
Sandra.
Yes, Rebecca, you inspired me. Within our, let's say, strategy in countering disinformation in the Western Balkans, we have created this blueprint, which is directing you, if you are part of this democratic aisle, so you can know where to focus and what to do. So one of the big things there, or one of the three priorities, is demonetize disinformation. It's a difficult word. And it's the same level of difficultness is to achieve it in real life. But what we have seen is that in the Western Balkans, companies who are coming from the EU member countries are putting ads and a lot of money into media who are anti-EU and who are using disinformation with anti-EU sentiment to actually promote this to their readers. So one of the parts of this demonetization process is actually to speak up with these private sector companies and explain that there has to be something like an ethical framework in where would you put your money. And this goes not just with the private sector, but actually there is a way of working with big tech platforms into achieving this ethical framework as well. So I just wanted to build up to that.
Thank you. Thanks, Svetlana. We're really just about out of time. I wanted to give Jihad, Stéphane, and Chris the last word on what's being discussed here, including what do you see as the most urgent priority moving forward? Is it public education? Is it funding? Is it the ability to scale up? Is it having a new vision for global policy and global governance of digital?
I will repeat the call for donors. We have to take cybersecurity of the civil society and non-profit sector as a dire priority, and that means we need to fund it.
Stéphane,
Same.
I'm sure you'll agree with that.
Same, donors, and to civil society in the room, if you're in need of cybersecurity support for free, forever, contact me. That's why we're here.
Jihad?
No, scale up, keep scaling up. This is an ongoing battle that is happening. It's been happening, I think, for probably thousands of years. It's just that the tools are different. We have to work into this and move forward. Just on the funding, our model has been. Stéphane mentioned something around this on the public-private partnership. We do have for-profit work that supports our non-profit work, allowing us to sustain our actions and have impact.
Thank you all. We are out of time. We could go on all day, but thank you for you around our speakers for showing us that there are indeed tools that are available to us to counter disinformation. Thank you all very much.